The 1996 Mount Everest disaster refers to the events of May 11, 1996, when 8 people were caught in a blizzard and died on Mount Everest during summit attempts. In the entire season, 15 people died trying to reach the summit, making these the deadliest day and the deadliest year on Mount Everest until the 16 fatalities of the 2014 Mount Everest avalanche. The 1996 disaster gained wide publicity and raised questions about the commercialization of Everest. A number of climbers, including a number of large teams as well as some small partnerships and even some soloists, were high on Everest during the storm. While climbers died on both the North Face and South Col approaches, the events on the South Face are better known. Journalist Jon Krakauer, on assignment from Outside magazine, was in a party led by guide Rob Hall that lost 4 climbers on the south side, and afterwards published the bestseller Into Thin Air, which related his experience. Anatoli Boukreev, whose party lost a guide, but no clients, felt impugned by Krakauer's book and co-authored a rebuttal book called The Climb: Tragic Ambitions on Everest. Beck Weathers, of Hall's expedition, and Lene Gammelgaard, of Boukreev's expedition, wrote about their experiences of the disaster in their respective books, Left for Dead, My Journey Home from Everest and Climbing High. The storm's impact on climbers on the mountain's other side, the North Ridge, where several climbers also died, was detailed in a first-hand account by British filmmaker and writer Matt Dickinson in his book The Death Zone. South Col route events, climbers. The following is a list of climbers en route to the summit on May 10, 1996 via the South Col and Southeast Ridge, organized by Expedition and Roll. Adventure Consultants. The Adventure Consultants 1996 Everest Expedition, led by Rob Hall, consisted of these individuals. Guides: Rob Hall, a Euro expedition leader; Mike Groom, Andy Harris. Clients: Frank Fishbeck, a Euro attempted Everest 3 times, reached the south summit in '94, Doug Hansen, a Euro attempted Everest with Hall's team in '95, Stuart Hutchison, a Euro youngest client on Hall's team. Previous 8000 AM experience include K2 Winter Expedition 1988, Broad Peak West Ridge 1992, and Everest Northside 1994. Luke Esishke, Euro had climbed 6 of the 7 summits. Jon Krakauer, a Euro journalist on assignment from Outside magazine, accomplished technical climber. But no 8000 AM experience. Yasuko Namba, Euro had climbed 6 of the 7 summits, attempting to become oldest woman to summit Everest. John Tasker, Euro oldest climber on the Adventure Consultants team, no 8000 AM experience. Beck Weathers, a Euro had been climbing for 10 years and was also making a bid for the 7 summits, no 8000 AM experience. All ages are as of 1996. Sherpas: B. Serdurang Dorji Sherpa, Arita Sherpa, Shvdam Sherpa, Lakpa Chhiri Sherpa, Kami Sherpa, Nawang Norbu Sherpa, Tenzing Sherpa. B. The Sherpas listed here were the climbing Sherpas hired by Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants. There were many other Sherpas working at lower elevations, who performed duties vital to the Adventure Consultants and Mountain Madness expeditions. Most climbing Sherpas' duties require them to ascend at least as high as Camp 3 or 4, but not all of them summit. The expedition leaders intend for only a select few of their climbing Sherpas to actually summit. None of the clients on Hall's team had ever summited an 8000 m peak, and only Fishbeck, Hansen and Hutchison has previous high-altitude Himalayan experience. Hall had brokered a deal with Outside magazine for advertising space in exchange for a story about the growing popularity of commercial expeditions to Everest. Krakauer was originally slated to climb with Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness team, but Hall landed him, at least in part, by agreeing to reduce Outside's fee for Krakauer's spot on the expedition to less than cost. As a result, Hall was paying out of pocket to have Krakauer on his team. Mountain Madness: Scott Fisher was the lead climbing guide for the Mountain Madness expedition. The team included 8 clients. Guides: Scott Fisher, a Euro lead climbing guide; Neil Beidelman, Anatoli Boukreev. Clients: Martin Adamza, Euro had climbed Aconcagua, Denali, and Kilimanjaro; Charlotte Fox had climbed all 53 of the 14,000 feet peaks in Colorado and 2 8,000 m peaks. Gashibramdu and Cho'oya. Lene Gammelgaard accomplished mountaineer. Dale Cruz personal friend of Fisher for many years, first to sign up. Tim Madsen climbed extensively in the Colorado and Canadian Rockies, no 8,000 am experience. Sandy Hill Pittman had climbed 6 of the 7 summits. Cliff Schoening Pete's nephew. Former U.S. national downhill ski racer, no 8,000 am experience. Pete Schoening one of the first to climb Gasherbrum and Mount Vinson, known for single-handedly saving the lives of 6 team members during a mass fall on the American expedition on K2, 1953. A. All ages are as of 1996. Sherpas, C. Serdar Lopsang Jangbu Sherpa, Big Pemba Sherpa, Nwang Dorji Sherpa, Nwang Sayakaya Sherpa, Nwang Tendi Sherpa, Nwang Tok Sherpa, Tashi Chring Sherpa, Tendi Sherpa, c. The Sherpas listed here were the climbing Sherpas hired by Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness expedition. Nwang Tok was hospitalized in April. He had developed HAPE while ferrying supplies above base camp. He was not on the mountain during the summit attempt of May 10. Tok would later die from his illness in June. Pete Schoening had decided not to make the final push to the summit while still at Everest Base Camp. The team began the assault on the summit on May 6, bypassing Camp I and stopping at Camp 2 for 2 nights. However, crews suffered from altitude sickness and possible HACE and stopped at Camp I. Fisher climbed down from Camp 2 and escorted crews back to base camp for treatment. Taiwanese expedition, Makalu Gao Mingho led a 13-member team to Everest and was climbing with Kami Dorji Sherpa, Njima Gombu Sherpa, and Mingmat Shring Sherpa that day. The previous day, Taiwanese team member Chen Yunan had died following a fall on the lead's face. Delays reaching the summit. Shortly after midnight on May 10, 1996, the Adventure Consultants expedition began a summit attempt from Camp 4, atop the South Colonel. They were joined by 6 client climbers, 3 guides and Sherpas from Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness Company, as well as an expedition sponsored by the government of Taiwan. The expeditions quickly encountered delays. The climbing Sherpas and guides had not set the fixed ropes by the time the team reached the balcony, and this cost the team almost an hour. There is some question as to the cause of this failure, which cannot now be resolved as the expedition leaders perished. Upon reaching the Hillary Step, the climbers again discovered that no fixed line had been placed, and they were forced to wait for an hour while the guides installed the ropes. Because some 33 climbers were attempting the summit on the same day, and Hall and Fisher had asked their climbers to stay within 150 am of each other, there were bottlenecks at the single fixed line at the Hillary Step. Climbing without supplemental oxygen, Guide Boukreev from the Mountain Madness team reached the summit first at 1:07 p.m. Many of the climbers had not yet reached the summit by 2:00 p.m., the last safe time to turn around to reach Camp 4 before nightfall. Boukreev began his descent to Camp 4 at 2:30 p.m., having spent nearly 1.5 hours at or near the summit helping others complete their climb. By that time, Hall, Krakauer, Harris, Beidelman and Mountain Madness clients Martin Adams and Cliff Schoening had reached the summit, and the remaining 4 Mountain Madness clients had arrived. After this time, Jon Krakauer noted that the weather did not look so benign, and at 3:00 p.m. snow started to fall and the light was diminishing. Gao summited about 3:00 p.m. and noticed incoming bad weather at 3:10. Hall's Serdar, Ang Dorji Sherpa, and other climbing Sherpas waited at the summit for the clients. Near 3:00 p.m., they began their descent. On the way down, Ang Dorji encountered client Doug Hansen above the Hillary Step, and ordered him to descend. Hansen did not respond. When Hall arrived at the scene, he sent the Sherpas down to assist the other clients, and stated that he would remain to help Hansen, who had run out of supplementary oxygen. Scott Fisher did not summit until 3:45 p.m. He was exhausted from the ascent and becoming increasingly ill, possibly suffering from HAPE or HACE, or a combination of both. Gao, his Sherpas, and Doug Hansen reached the summit even later. Descent in a blizzard. Boukreev recorded that he reached Camp 4 by 5:00 p.m. The reasons for Boukreev's decision to descend ahead of his clients are disputed. Boukreev maintained that he wanted to be ready to assist struggling clients further down the slope, and to retrieve hot tea and extra oxygen if necessary. Boukreev's decision not to use bottled oxygen was sharply criticized by Jon Krakauer. Boukreev's supporters state that using bottled oxygen gives a false sense of security. Krakauer and his supporters point out that, without bottled oxygen, Boukreev was unable to directly help his clients descend. They state that Boukreev said that he was going down with client Martin Adams, but Boukreev later descended faster and left Adams behind. The worsening weather began causing difficulties for the descending team members. By now, the blizzard on the southwest face of Everest was diminishing visibility, burying the fixed ropes and obliterating the trail back to Camp 4 that the teams had broken on the ascent. Fisher, helped by Lobsang Jangbu Sherpa, was unable to descend below the balcony in the storm. Sherpas left Makalegaon with Fisher and Lobsang when he too became unable to proceed. Eventually, Lobsang was persuaded by Fisher to descend and leave him and Gao. Hall radioed for help, saying that Hansen had fallen unconscious, but was still alive. At 5:30 p.m. adventure consultants guide Andy Harris, carrying supplementary oxygen and water, began climbing alone from the south summit to Hansen and Hall at the top of Hillary Step. Krakauer's account notes that by this time, the weather had deteriorated into a full-scale blizzard. Snow pellets borne on 70-mile-per-hour winds stung my face. Boukreev gives 6:00 p.m. as the onset of the blizzard. Several climbers became lost on the South Colonel Mountain Madness members Bidelman, Cliff Schoening, Fox, Madsen, Pittman, and Gammelgaard, along with adventure consultants Mike Room, Beck Weathers, and Yasuko Namba, wandered in the blizzard until midnight. When they could no longer walk, they huddled some 20 a.m. from a drop-off of the Kangshung face. Near midnight, the blizzard cleared enough for the team to see Camp 4, some 200 a.m. away. Bidelman, Groom, Schoening, and Gammelgaard set off to find help. Madsen and Fox remained with the group to shout for the rescuers. Boukreev located the climbers and brought Pittman, Fox, and Madsen to safety. Boukreev had prioritized Pittman, Fox and Madsen over Namba, who seemed close to death. Boukreev did not see Beck Weathers. Having made 2 forays to rescue these 3 climbers, Boukreev, in common with all other climbers then at Camp 4, was exhausted. Neither Boukreev nor any of the other climbers at Camp 4 felt able to make another attempt to reach Namba and Weathers. May 11th. On May 11th, at 4:43 a.m. Hall radioed down and said that he was on the south summit. He reported that Harris had reached to 2 men, but that Hansen, who had been with him since the previous afternoon, was now gone. In addition, he said that Harris was missing as well. Hall was not breathing bottled oxygen because his regulator was too choked with ice. By 9:00 a.m., Hall had fixed his oxygen mask, but indicated that his frostbitten hands and feet were making it difficult to traverse the fixed ropes. Later in the afternoon, he radioed to base camp, asking them to call his wife, Jan Arnold, on the satellite phone. During this last communication, he reassured her that he was reasonably comfortable and told her, "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." Shortly thereafter, he died, and his body was found on May 23 by mountaineers from the IMAX expedition. The bodies of Doug Hansen and Andy Harris have not been found to date. Meanwhile, Stuart Hutchison, a client on Hall's team who turned around before the summit on May 10, launched a second search for Weathers and Namba. He found both alive but barely responsive and severely frostbitten, and in no condition to move. Making a difficult decision that they could not be saved by the hypoxic survivors at Camp 4 nor evacuated in time, he left them for nature to take its course, which the other survivors soon agreed was the only choice. However, Weathers later in the day regained consciousness and walked alone by his own power to the camp, surprising everyone there, though he was still suffering severe hypothermia and frostbite. Despite oxygen and attempts to reanimate him, Weathers was almost abandoned again the next morning, May 12. after a storm had collapsed his tent overnight and the survivors once again thought he had died. Krakauer discovered he was still conscious as the survivors in Camp 4 prepared to evacuate. Despite his worsening condition, Weathers found he could still move mostly under his own power and a rescue team was mobilizing, hopeful of getting Weathers down the mountain alive. Over the next 2 days, Weathers was ushered down to Camp 2 with the assistance of 8 healthy climbers from various expeditions, and would be evacuated by a daunting helicopter rescue. He would eventually recover but lose his nose, right hand, and all the fingers on his left hand due to frostbite. The climbing Sherpas located Fisher and Gow on May 11, but Fisher's condition had deteriorated so much that they were only able to give palliative care before rescuing Gow. Boukreev made a subsequent rescue attempt, but found Fisher's frozen body at around 7 p.m. Like Weathers, Gow was also evacuated by helicopter. Indo-Tibetan Border Police, less well known are the other 3 fatalities of the day, who were the climbers from the Indo-Tibetan Border Police North Col expedition from India. The expedition was led by Commandant Mohinder Singh, and is credited as being the first Indian ascent of Everest from the north side. On May 10, 1996, Subedar Tsvang Samanla, Lance Naik Dorji Marup and Head Constable Tsvang Palj were part of a 6-man summit attempt from the north side. The summit team did not have any Sherpas to guide them. They were the first team of the season to go up the north face. It would be their responsibility to fix the ropes during ascent and break the trail to the top, a task that is its own share of difficulties. The team was caught in the blizzard above Camp 4. While 3 of the 6 members turned down, Samanla, Palj and Marup decided to go for the summit. Samanla was an accomplished mountaineer who had summited Everest in 1984 and Kanchenjunga in 1991. At around 6:00 p.m., the 3 climbers radioed to their expedition leader that they had arrived at the summit. While the Indian camp was jubilant in their celebrations, some of the other mountaineers at base camp had already expressed their reservations about the timing, which was quite late in the day to be on the summit. There is also a dispute whether the 3 had actually reached the summit. Krakauer claims that the climbers were at 8,700 am, roughly 150 am short of the topmost point. This is based on the interview given by a later Japanese team to Richard Coupens of the London Financial Express. Due to bad visibility and thick clouds which obscured the summit, the climbers believed they had reached the top. This also explains why the climbers did not run into the teams that summited from the south side. The 3 climbers left an offering of prayer flags, katars and pitons. Samanla, the summit team leader, decided to spend extra time for religious ceremonies and instructed the other 2 climbers to begin their descent. There was no radio contact after that. Back at the camps below, anxious team members saw 2 headlamps moving just above the second step. None of the 3 managed to come back to high camp at 8,320 am. Possible sightings by Japanese climbers. On May 11, 1996, on the morning after Samanla, Palj and Marup had made their push for the summit and encountered the blizzard, a Japanese team from the Fukuoka expedition started its final ascent from the north side. The Fukuoka climbers would report seeing other climbers during their summit push not unexpected given the number of climbers camped or climbing on the final 550 am of the mountain that day. All times Beijing time, 6:15 Hiroshi Hanada and Asyuk Shikawa departed Camp 6. 3 Sherpas had left in advance. 08.45 radio call to BC to report nearing the ridge. Just below the ridge they met 2 climbers coming down a fixed rope. On the ridge another climber appeared before the first snowfield. They could not be identified because all were wearing goggles and oxygen masks under hoods. The Fukuoka party, having no knowledge of missing Indians, thought they were Taiwan Party members. In Krakauer's account, the lone climber, was still moaning and frostbitten from exposure over the night. The Japanese climbers ignored him and set out for the summit. After ascending the second step, they ran into the other 2 climbers, probably Samanla and Marup. Krakauer notes no words were passed, no water, food or oxygen exchanged hands. The Japanese moved on. 11:39 radio call to BC to report passing the second step. They then saw two climbers at a distance of about 15 am from the ridge. Again, identification was impossible. 15:07 Hanada, Shikawa and three Sherpas reached a summit. 15:30 start descent. After passing the triangle snowfield they saw some unidentifiable object above the second step. Below the first step, they saw one person on the fixed rope. Shikawa therefore stopped and radioed BC. As he started moving again he met someone, who had possibly been on the fixed rope, standing nearby. They exchanged greetings, but he was still unable to identify him. Their oxygen was just enough to return to C6. 16:00 an Indian party member told the Fukuoka ABC that three men were missing. The Fukuoka party attempted to dispatch three Sherpas from C6 to rescue the Indians but disappearing daylight prevented their departure. Their request to Indian party members at C6 to join a rescue was refused. Also their offer of a radio so that the Indian party could talk to their leader in ABC was declined. Initially, the apparent indifference of the Japanese climbers was dumbfounding, as the Indian expedition leader told later, the Japanese had initially pledged to help the search for the missing Indians. But hours later, they pressed on with their attempt to reach the summit, despite bad weather. The Japanese team reached the summit at 11:45 am. By the time the Japanese climbers descended, one of the two Indians was already dead and the other near death. They could not find any trace of the third climber further down. The Japanese team denied that they had ever encountered the dying climbers on the way up. Captain Kali, an official of the Indian Mountaineering Federation, who earlier had denounced the Japanese, later retracted his claim that the Japanese had reported meeting the Indians on May 10. The ITBP accepted the Fukuoka party statements that they neither abandoned nor refused to help the Indians. The ITBP's Director General commented that a misunderstanding arose from communication difficulties between Indian attack party members and their base camp. Powell's body, nicknamed Green Boots, has served as a marker for subsequent climbers alongside the limestone alcove where the body lies. Analysis: the disaster was partially caused by the sheer number of climbers attempting to ascend. The congestion of the crowd, combined with delays in securing ropes, caused bottlenecks at the Hillary Step. This delayed the ascent of many climbers, and therefore, many summited after the safe 2:00 p.m. turnaround time. Jon Krakauer has suggested that the use of bottled oxygen and commercial guides, who would personally accompany and take care of all path-making, equipment, and important decisions, allowed otherwise unqualified climbers to attempt to summit, leading to dangerous situations and more deaths. In addition, he wrote that the competition between Hall and Fisher's guiding companies may have led to Hall's decision not to turn back on May 10 after the pre-decided time for summiting of 2:00 p.m. Krakauer also acknowledges that his own presence as a journalist for an important magazine for mountaineers may have added pressure to guide clients to the summit despite growing dangers. He proposed banning bottled oxygen except for emergency cases, arguing that this would both decrease the growing pollution on Everest many bottles have accumulated on its slopes and keep marginally qualified climbers off the mountain. He does point out, however, that climbing Everest has always been a highly dangerous expedition even before guided tours, with one fatality per 4 climbers attaining the summit. Further, he notes that many of the poor decisions made on May 10 were after 2 or more days of inadequate oxygen, nourishment, and rest. He concludes that decisions made in such conditions should not be easily judged by the general population, who have no such experience. Krakauer also elaborated on the statistical curiosities of fatality rates on Everest and how 1996 was business as usual. The record number of 12 fatalities in the spring climbing season that year was 3% of the 398 climbers who had ascended above base camp slightly below the historical average of 3.3% at that time. Additionally, 12 climbers had died that season and 84 had reached the summit. This is a ratio of 1 in 7, significantly less than the historical average prior to 1996 of 1 in 4. While since then the fatality rates on Everest have dropped considerably, Accounting for the volume of climbers in 1996 compared to prior years, 1996 was statistically a safer-than-average year. In May 2004, Ken Moore, a physicist, and John L. Semple, a surgeon, both researchers from the University of Toronto, told New Scientist magazine that an analysis of weather conditions on May 11 suggested that freak weather caused oxygen levels to plunge by around 14%. List of fatalities. Other fatalities in 1996. The following is a list of the other fatalities during the spring 1996 climbing season on Everest. These deaths were not directly related to the storm or the events of the May 11, 1996 Everest disaster. May 9 Chen Yunan from the Taiwanese National Expedition, died from a fall down the Lutz face. May 19 Reinhard Lassig Austrian climber, died from a combination of HAPE and HACE at 8,300 am on the Northeast Ridge. May 25 Bruce Harrod South African team, was on the South Col during the May 11 storm and reached a summit 2 weeks later, but died descending the Southeast Ridge. June 6 Nawang Tok Sherpa Nepalese Sherpa. For Mountain Madness, developed a severe case of HAPE on April 22 while working above base camp. Died later in a Kathmandu hospital. The following fatalities occurred on Everest during the fall 1996 climbing season. September 25 Yves Bouchner French climber, died in an avalanche at 7,800 am on the southeast route below Camp 4, along with the two Sherpas listed below. September 25 Lopsang Jangbu Sherpa Nepalese Sherpa, the same climbing surder on the Mountain Madness expedition involved in the May 1996 Everest disaster. Died in avalanche. September 25 Dewar Sherpa Nepalese Sherpa. Died in avalanche. Documentary. The 1996 tragedy is subject of a documentary by director David Breashears, released in 2007 under the name Remnants of Everest, the 1996 tragedy. It was released in the U.S. under the name Storm Over Everest. The music for the documentary was composed by Jocelyn Pook. See also, List of 20th-century summiters of Mount Everest, List of people who died climbing Mount Everest, Everest, List of deaths on 8,000ers, Bibliography, Notes. References, Krakauer, Jon. Into Thin Air, A Personal Account of the Mount Everest Disaster. Doubleday. ISBN A978-0-385-49208-9. Total pages, external links, the website for the 2008 PBS Frontline television show titled Storm Over Everest. PBS Frontline, Storm Over Everest WashingtonPost.com, Everest's Worst Disaster, A Decade On, Climber Recounts Tragedy in Storm Over Everest, Ken Kamler, Medical Miracle on Everest TED.